Hey friends, are you ready for a new adventure? Then let's jump right into it. In a village nestled between rolling hills and a sparkling river lived a shoemaker. His shop was renowned throughout the town and even in neighboring villages. People would come to have their shoes repaired or to buy new ones because the cobbler was so skilled at his craft. But despite this, the shoemaker wasn't rich by any means. In fact, he struggled every day to make ends meet. It saddened him greatly that he couldn't provide better for himself and his family. One evening, after a particularly slow day in which he had barely earned enough money to buy bread for the next morning, the shoemaker sadly surveyed his meager possessions. He thought about his tools, his half-finished projects, and his empty coffers. With a heavy heart, he realized he did not have enough money to continue his business and would have to close his shop forever. As night fell, the shoemaker went to bed, not knowing that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The sound of crickets chirping outside was the only thing that could be heard in the quiet village. The moon shone brightly through the window, casting long shadows across the room. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The shoemaker stirred from his sleep, but it must have been a mouse darting around its hole, he thought, and went back to sleep. But then the knocking came again, louder than before. Confused, the shoemaker got out of bed and slowly approached the door. As he opened it, he saw a tiny little mouse standing on his threshold. The mouse looked up at the shoemaker with pleading eyes and squeaked incessantly. At first, the shoemaker didn't know what to do. He had never seen a mouse that talked before. But then he remembered an old wives' tale that said if a mouse asked for something, it was best to grant it, as it was believed to be a sign of good fortune. So he asked the mouse, "What can I do for you?" The mouse replied in a surprisingly deep voice, "I'm sorry to bother you, kind sir, but I need your help. My brothers and I have been working hard all summer to gather food for the winter. But we haven't managed to collect enough grain yet, and we worried that we might starve if we don't get some soon. If you could spare just a little bit for us, we'd be eternally grateful." The shoemaker felt sorry for the mouse and its friends, so he went into the kitchen and brought out some cheese and grain that he had saved for himself. He placed it all in front of the mouse and said, "Here, this should be enough for you and your brothers. Please don't tell anyone that I gave you this though, as I don't want other mice coming to ask for food too." The mouse thanked the shoemaker profusely and promised not to tell anyone. It then quickly scurried away with its prize. The shoemaker returned to bed, feeling warm and fuzzy inside. He had done something nice for someone in need, and that made him feel good. The next morning, when he woke up, he went to his workroom to get some leather and tools to make a new pair of shoes. But when he stepped inside, he gasped in amazement. On his workbench, he found a brand new pair of shoes, perfectly crafted and ready to wear. Startled, he backed away from the table, wondering who could have made them. Was it a dream? He pinched himself to make sure he was awake. It wasn't a dream. The shoes were real. He looked around the room, but everything was in its place. No one had entered the room overnight. The shoemaker was puzzled and couldn't think of any logical explanation. He tried the shoes on and found they fit perfectly. They were made of the finest leather and were more beautiful than any pair he had ever seen. He put them on and walked around his workshop, feeling a sense of pride and wonder. Who had made these for him? And how did they get there without him seeing anyone enter? Determined to find out the truth, the shoemaker stayed in his workroom overnight. He sat in a chair by the window, keeping watch, hoping to catch whoever was responsible in the act. As the hours passed, he grew increasingly tired and eventually fell asleep. When he woke up, it was to the sound of hammering and sewing. Startled, he opened his eyes and saw a group of tiny elves busily working on new pairs of shoes. They were using the finest materials and their nimble fingers flew as they worked. The shoemaker watched in awe as they moved around the room, seemingly unaffected by his presence. After what seemed like an eternity, the elves finished their work and the shoemaker couldn't believe his eyes. There were dozens of pairs of shoes scattered around the room, each one more beautiful than the last. The elves, noticing that the shoemaker was awake, stopped their work and turned to him, their faces full of curiosity. The shoemaker, still in shock, stammered, "Who are you? How did you get in here? And why are you making shoes?" The elves looked at each other and then one of them stepped forward. "My name is Alara," she said, "and these are my brothers and sisters. We are shoemakers, just like you, and we heard about your troubles from a friend. We wanted to help, so we came to you in the middle of the night to make these shoes for you." The shoemaker was overwhelmed with emotion. He couldn't believe that these tiny creatures had risked their own comfort to help him. He felt ashamed that he had judged them for entering his home, and he apologized profusely. The elves, sensing his sincerity, quickly forgave him. Alara then turned to the shoemaker and said, "We would love to stay and help you more, but we have to return to our forest now. Winter is coming and we need to prepare our homes for the cold weather. The shoemaker understood and didn't want to hold them back. He knew that they had done enough by making him new shoes, but he wanted to show his gratitude, so he asked, "Is there anything I can do for you before you go?" Alara looked at him and smiled. "Yes, actually, there is. We don't have much use for shoes in the forest, but we do need warm clothes for the winter. Would you be able to make us some simple shirts and hats?" The shoemaker's face lit up. This was something he could do. He had plenty of fabric and yarn in his house, and he knew just how to make cozy clothes for the elves. With renewed energy, the shoemaker ran to his house and gathered the materials he needed. He then returned to the elves and started sewing. The elves, seeing that the shoemaker was just as busy as they had been, knew that he meant them no harm. They had only wanted to help him, and now they were grateful that he was repaying the favor. Hours passed and the sky outside started to turn gray. The elves knew that they had to leave soon, so they helped the shoemaker finish the clothes. Finally, they were done. The shoemaker stood back and admired his work. He had made 12 shirts and hats, one for each of the elves. The clothes were simple, but they were warm and sturdy, and he knew that they would keep the elves safe from the winter cold. The elves, overjoyed with their new clothes, thanked the shoemaker over and over again. They were so happy that he had taken the time to make these for them, and they promised to never forget his kindness. With their new clothes in hand, the elves said their goodbyes and disappeared into the forest. The shoemaker watched them go, feeling a sense of contentment that he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew that he would never forget the elves and what they had done for him. From that day on, the shoemaker's life changed for the better. The shoes the elves had made were so beautiful and well-crafted that they sold out in the village market faster than he could make them. People came from far and wide to buy his shoes, and he became known as the best shoemaker in the land. Despite his newfound success, the shoemaker never forgot the kindness of the elves. Every year, he would make them new clothes for the winter, and he would always remember the valuable lesson he had learned from them, that sometimes the smallest creatures can do the greatest things